I started Simplify with my cousin Ryan. So he actually, by training, is an orthodontist. Ryan was in school, they have massive clinics and see hundreds of patients every single day.
You know, I developed this concept and it started to kind of take off. I said, Zach, I think I've got something here. You know, you're in venture capital, let's do this together.
So what we did was we applied technology to that process to simplify the communication between the staff and the doctor as they go through the day, as they move the patient through their appointment.
That's how Simplify was born.
Simplify in its earliest days was focused on dentistry, but what we realized is the pain point we are solving for is applicable across the healthcare setting.
There are many benefits to using Simplify. We don't walk into a room now and have to look at the chart or look at the screen. We know in advance who the patient is, what their procedure was done the last time they were in.
We've all experienced that where the doctor walks in the door, immediately they're going to turn to the desktop terminal.
If I knew what I was doing when I walked into the room and knew who my patient was, it wouldn't just make a difference to me because I'd be able to get up and going quicker, but it would make a huge difference to my patients because they feel more welcome. I think the second really valuable piece is just communication also within the office.
If front desk is telling you the next patient's here, or there's an email from a patient, I can't rip off my gloves, take off my mask, and like run out. So at least with this, I'll hear a vibration, I'll look at it, and I can quickly look to see what the message is. Like right now, I just got a notification.
For the healthcare setting, being hands-free, being discreet, have a notification there, or on the iPad is fantastic because what we're focused on is delivering an amazing patient experience and keeping that face-to-face.
That's why I think a lot of people have disdain for medicine. We're really good at treating patients. The problem is that it's the interpersonal relationships that sometimes go to the wayside.
The patients really are at the number one of everything we do, and they're able to see that we're putting them there. So Simplify puts the patient at the center, which is where they should be.
So for our market in healthcare, there's a big concern around data security. The Apple brand lends itself to a reputation of secure devices, secure information. Pair that with Jamf, and we can really make that relevant for healthcare settings.
We've also enabled HIPAA-compliant chat between these devices. You can communicate from desktop to watch, watch to phone, phone to watch, and back and forth without having a problem. It's just something that we've approached very seriously and taken it to the next level with partners like Jamf.
Jamf can provide out of the box with a press of the button that we would have a challenge finding with a different device management partner.
So these devices, when they're shipped to us, because we do a lot of pre-setup with it, we'd take it out of the box and the little profile would just show up. So they work directly with Apple so that when the device showed up, the rest is done. That was unbelievable.
Putting Apple devices into the healthcare setting is a big deal, but without people like Jamf, with that extreme innovation leadership, without Simplify and Apple all working together, the world's really not going to move forward. And so when you pair the best application developers, you pair that with the best hardware, you can really, really change industries.
Good morning, JNUC. We've got another packed house this morning. That's terrific. However, I do see a couple of empty chairs out there. I don't know what it's like upstairs, but I have a feeling a few people rolled over this morning and maybe hit live stream on this morning's session. And for those of you out there who are doing that, aspirin and plenty of water. You'll feel better in no time. We don't want to miss you anymore at JNUC today, so please swing on over. Day 2 of JNUC, for me, I love it because as is tradition here, day 1, we typically tell you about what's latest with our products and partnerships and those types of things. But day 2, we really promote stories that inspire us and people that inspire us. And we really like to hear from Jamf Nation itself. It's less scripted, it's more conversational, and it's just stories and experts that we would like to expose to all of you for your benefit. We're going to break this morning's session up really into a couple of pieces. The beginning part of the session is going to talk about this notion of user productivity and user choice. and giving the users a voice in the enterprise to choose the device that they're happiest with and make them more productive. It's going to center a little bit more around the Mac, although it can apply to any devices. And then the second half of the session is going to focus more on that organizational and industry transformation that occurs in industries like healthcare and education. And it's going to focus a little bit more on the iPad side of things. But no matter what the device focus is, what I love about the video that you just saw is there was no focus on any one of the devices. It was speaking to the power that comes from the desktop, speaking to the iPhone, speaking to the watch, so that you don't have to think about where you're going next or why you're going there. You just know. And it's the power of the entire Apple ecosystem. And of course, as you know, that is what we love. I mentioned yesterday that our mission is to help organizations succeed with Apple. And part of the reason for that is that we love it. So to frame up this first part of this morning's session on user choice, I want to just step back a little bit. And I told you all a couple of years ago a little bit about my background, but I first fell in love with technology when I was 16 years old, and I saw the very first computer I had ever seen in my life, which was an Apple IIe. And I learned how to program on it and learned AppleSoft Basic, and I decided that I wanted to go into the technology field, and I was going to go into computer science. A few months ago, my daughter graduated from high school, and we were going through old photos, and I found a couple of old photos that reminded me and actually sort of inspired a thought in me of how this journey came that I got to Jamf. And it was when I graduated from high school in 1985, and this shot that you see is actually proof that I indeed did graduate, and the year was 1985. It was June 1985, and the interesting thing about that is that was exactly 30 years to the month, probably to the week, before I joined Jamf. And it's hard to tell exactly how it is that I was led to Jamf one day, but then I came along another picture in this box that kind of explained it. And it was the picture of the cake that my mother made me for celebration. And then this tells you how I felt about technology at the time, that my mother actually made me a computer cake. And you can see on the screen, she actually wrote in, "Dean, congratulations, you're programmed for success." I guarantee you my mother didn't know what the word program meant when she wrote that, but she had heard me use it historically. And apparently I was so enamored with this cake that I took a picture of it, and I kept the picture for 30 years. So I was very, very proud of this. Of course, it doesn't look in any way, shape, or form like an Apple IIe computer, but she did her best. But then I looked again at this cake. And if you focus in on the white section in the middle of the cake, something special happens. I think that looks just like a MacBook Air. Now, I'm not going to give my mother credit for having designed in 1985 the original MacBook Air, because that'd be silly. But I don't think it's an overstatement to suggest that the technology forces in the universe had given my mother a vision that she painted out in frosting that set my fate for the organization that I was going to join exactly 30 years later. So this love of the Mac runs deep. And yes, it is a little bit weird to start out that way. And speaking of weird, I'd like to introduce our first guest, the Corporate Vice President of Enterprise Management and Security, Fred Anderson. Thanks, Fred. Come on up.
Oh, I graduated in May of 1985. You know
Did
that?
you really?
We both had hair.
Oh, yeah. I had to actually. You should have seen me a couple of years later. I had awesome hair. So with that said, yesterday you were here all day long. Of course, you demoed it in the beginning of the general session. And I saw you actually out in the hallways with no security detail around you. Do you feel safe here at JNUC?
Absolutely. You know, I have to say a shout out to the Jamf Nation. The reception has been awesome. You know, people pulling me aside in the hallway, in the hotel, at restaurants, in the gym this morning. And like saying, this is exactly what it is that we were hoping you would do.
So were they staring at the gym in the morning?
Well, 5 o'clock in the morning. There's not a lot of people in the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning.
All right.
Let me give you a little insight, though. At Microsoft, as we think about enterprise mobility, it's about the mobility of the human and the human spirit. And so, we believe that we need to empower users on the devices that they want to use. And so as we think about this, we now have Office running on millions of Mac devices. The Office mobile apps run on 90 million iOS and Android devices. And these are beautiful, rich applications that people love.
It is, and that is exactly, I talked, in jest, I say it's weird that Brad is here, but it's really not. Yesterday when we were talking, we had meetings with customers, all day long.
Great.
And it just hit me as we were talking to customers that they had two organizations sitting together that make up their whole solution, and they could turn to either of us because ultimately what they want is they want a solution that works, whether it runs on the Mac, whether it runs on Windows. Of course, they're leveraging Office 365, and the fact that we were able to work together and come up with the specific actions that would take care of them, it's not weird at all that we're together. It's really awesome. Now, Brad, I have plagiarized you many times since we first spoke, which other than me completely spacing off his name at the beginning has been for a while. And the first time we talked, you said a couple of things that I actually told you in the conversation. Yeah. I'm going to plagiarize you. That. And it was when you said that a solution that users love and IT trusts. And the other thing that you said that really inspired me is you talked about how the security perimeter for an enterprise has completely changed. And it's really that has inspired everything that we're doing together. Could you just riff a little bit about that notion of a solution that users love, IT trust, in regards to that security perimeter that's changing?
You bet. As a design principle, as well as our mission, we believe that our role is to deliver that modern, secure, and empowering modern workplace that is loved by users and trusted by IT. And you think about what does it mean to deliver a security solution that is loved by users? Well, that's actually really hard to do. And so what we've done for the last several years is really deeply understand the workflow and the way in which people work, and then embed our security and protection in a natural way where IT can set the guardrails, and then if a user kind of bumps up against those guardrails, in a seamless way, we kind of guide them to protect that company data. So all this is just natively built into the Office mobile apps. It's built into the services. And this is one of those things where you have to build for both. As brilliant as IT professionals are, if two products have not been really architected to work together from the get-go, there's only so much that you can do to make that work. And so working across the Office organization with my organization, I think we've done a really good job of building that solution, again, that's loved by users, trusted by IT. This thing about the perimeter is super fascinating, and we had a really early view of this. We've been helping customers deploy Office 365 now for a little over a decade. And early on, these early customers would come to us and say, listen, our SecOps team is coming back to us and saying, the data is no longer behind the firewall, it's up in the cloud. How in the world do we protect it? And so we had this really early view of this about a decade ago. You think about it for a minute, all of us, as you think about the way that we've secured our organizations for decades, we built walls around the company, these network perimeters. And that was the first line of defense.
The firewall.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it served us well. But now the data is moving from inside that firewall out to the cloud, and that perimeter-based security model is now ineffective because the data never passes through the perimeter. And so what organizations have to think through now is you have to move from a perimeter-based security model to what we call an identity-based security model. Because if you think about it, the identity is the one thing that is common across all of your users' devices. It unlocks the world for them. It also happens to be the place that everything is being attacked. You take a look at the data breaches that we read about every week. 80% of those root cause back to somebody's credentials having been phished or stolen or guessed. And so as an industry, the most important thing for us to protect is identities. And so that's what we have delivered with Microsoft 365. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the partnership that we've been building around conditional access now allows us to bring Max and the depth of what you do into that identity-driven security model. But organizations fundamentally have to rethink their security.
The notion that the identity is the perimeter, I just absolutely love it. Now you have obviously a wealth of products at Microsoft in Azure Active Directory, Office 365. You've got Intune and SCCM. And I don't know, sometimes, when you have so many products, the world, the clarity that they have of how all of that fits together to then, use the identity to protect an organization and provide access to the data. Could you give us just a picture of how all that works together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've spent years making sure these all work together. So first and foremost, as you think about Azure Active Directory, think about this as the identity service for enterprises in the cloud. Just like, you know, more than 90% of the world uses Active Directory as their authoritative source for enterprise identities on premises, Azure Active Directory is the authoritative source for enterprise identities in the cloud. Everything that we build at Microsoft is built on top of Azure Active Directory. Office 365, anytime any of your users go to use Office 365, it's an authentication against Azure Active Directory. We actually do that 15 billion times a day. Okay, so 15 billion times a day, we service authentications, and all of that brings telemetry back to us that then helps us to get this unique view of what's going on with identity. You know, Config Manager manages the bulk of the world's PCs, and Intune is kind of the cloud version of Config Manager. And so the way that we've built all this together is, you know, foundationally, Azure Active Directory and that identity is the core of everything. And then we build all of our solutions on top of that. And then we have this solution that we call the conditional access, which gives us that ability in real time to be able to measure the risks. And we have to do this in about 200 milliseconds every time a user comes up to access an Office 365 service, and make sure that only trusted users on trusted devices using trusted apps get access.
Awesome. Now, you know that in past years at JNUC, day 2, for the last 2 years, a guy named Fletcher Previn has been here and presented about their Mac program at IBM.
Oh, I've received emails from Satya on both of those days.
And you and Fletcher know each other, of course.
Well,
so as you're developing a modern method and have developed a modern method of managing on the Windows side as well, do you want to describe just a little bit of work that you've done with him? Really, in fairness, because we're just trying to build jointly the best solution for everybody. And of course, we promote Mac as much as possible, but we also want to just be transparent and honest as far as what's happening across all platforms. Describe a little bit of the work you've done with not only Fletcher, but with others in the industry as far as management.
You know, the reality is every organization is going to have a mix of devices and operating systems, and so we have to empower, you know, that modern workplace on all of them. You know, one of the great things that Fletcher did at IBM is they started in a greenfield, and they were able to get their Mac at IBM program, you know, done in a greenfield way and start with these modern management principles. Most of the organizations in the world, you know, are kind of using some of the traditional ways to manage PCs, and one of the things that we want to help everybody do is move to these modern principles, and that's what we do with Microsoft 365. And so we've been working closely with Fletcher and his team at IBM as they've rolled out the PC at IBM using those same modern principles. And, you know, the NSAT is up, their costs are down. And so these concepts that we're talking about modern management, where really, because, you know, you IT pros are going to rely upon us to do more of the work, you rely upon your users to do more of the work, you simplify what you're doing. It increases your end user sat, it decreases your costs, and quite honestly, your devices are actually more secure.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you've received a few emails after JNUCs in past years. Happy to have you here this year. We know full well why we were interested in partnering with Microsoft around this project. Few words on why you were agreeable to work with Jamf on this?
Oh, yeah. Well, even more agreeable. I reached out to you on LinkedIn and kind of said, hey, we need to be doing something together. You know, the customer promise and what all of you ask us to do is quite simply help us ensure that only trusted users on trusted devices using trusted apps get access to our data. That's the ask, and that's the promise. And so what we're constantly looking for is for organizations that have unique knowledge or unique intelligence that we can then incorporate into this concept called conditional access. And again, conditional access, what that allows us to do is take and in real time govern access to your on-prem assets and to your cloud assets based upon that risk that comes in looking at identity, devices, and apps. Well, as I was out visiting customers, every single enterprise that I met with, you know, uses Config Manager, and they were using Jamf. And so I looked at it and I said, Jamf is going to have this very unique set of capabilities, a unique set of controls that if we bring into our conditional access engine is going to deliver a better solution for organizations as they turn on conditional access and want to enforce that across all their companies. So I look at it and I think about the controls that you have, the unique knowledge that you have with the breadth that you do on those Mac devices, and that just makes our overall solution better.
I can't think of two organizations that manage devices for a living that probably had a greater overlap of customers that we could then go out and serve together. So as you look at the solution, you demoed it yesterday. You know, what is the coolest thing about that for our customers as we've come together?
Yeah, you know, really, as you think about the attacks that we're all worried about, quite honestly, they are so sophisticated and they are coming at such a rate and they spread so quick, humans can no longer keep up. And so you have to have the power of a cloud backing you, you know, having your back, if you will. And so now I look at what you're feeding into us, and that actually makes our cloud more intelligent. So I think what's really cool about this is we now have a richer solution that helps organizations to enable their users on their device of choice, but with the security that they need. And that's why I say loved by users, trusted by IT.
And I love that as well, and specifically the fact that it was more than just feeding data into Intune and of course connecting with Azure, but then also looping back the ability for a user to take care of themselves and get their system back into compliance by deep linking into self-service was terrific as well. Well, it may surprise some people to know this, but Jamf is an Office 365 shop. We have been for some time. And so, of course, we will be implementing this solution ourselves as well because it's a good solution. What could I say for you, Brad?
Yeah, people don't realize this, but we're actually a Jamf shop at Microsoft. You know, as we've done acquisitions, you got Yammer, LinkedIn, you know, they come in already using Jamf. And so I was actually emailing with our CISO last night, and our plan is to continue to use Jamf on our Mac devices and bring that all into the conditional access capabilities.
Awesome. One of the things that made this work is we first met actually Jamf and Microsoft together to talk about this product. It was about a year ago when we first started talking about it. And what I loved so much about the meeting is we were talking about product and like the go-to-market came up. Like how would we go to market together? And we basically just pushed it aside. And so let's focus on nothing but developing the best product possible. And we literally haven't talked about it in a year. And it came up for a moment in our conversation yesterday. And you said something again that inspired me the way that you said it. And we just pushed it aside again because it frankly didn't matter. What did you share with me?
Yeah, it's funny. Often two organizations, two partners will put a bunch of money in a go-to-market when they don't have a product truth that hunts. And so what I firmly believe is if you have product truth that has real customer value, the go-to-market takes care of itself. And I think we have a real product truth here in how the two solutions are working together that delivers real customer value. It was completely validated yesterday in all the conversations.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the opportunity to be
here.
here.
All right. Thank you
Thanks,
so
everybody.
much. Thanks, everybody. It definitely fits into the category of not something that you see every day, but you're seeing more and more of it. Because would you agree that if the organizations that you work with work together, that's better for you? And that has really been, the customer being the unifier here, has been the inspiration for me as we've been working with Microsoft. Now, we did make reference to a presentation that occurred here last year by Fletcher Previn. And if you didn't see it, might I suggest just go search on JNUC 2016 and you'll more than likely find it because it was probably the most covered presentation that's been given in the history of Jamf. And it was because of the irony of IBM, of all companies, starting to offer Mac choice in the workplace. And for those that didn't see the presentation, you can go out to the Jamf website and watch it again. I will remind you that it was done a year ago, and so it was actually prior to implementing some of the things even that Brad talked about, to be completely fair. But just to bring us all up to speed, we did go ahead and edit a 1.5-minute version of it just so that you can enjoy just a little bit of Fletcher.
We spend a lot of time within IBM thinking about IT as an extension of the culture that we want to have, right? It's one of the few functions that touch all employees. The goal here is not a cost takeout program. The goal here is to deliver an employee choice program and to at least aspire to have the greatest Mac program in the world. And what we observe is 5% of the Mac callers ever require a person to come to their desk and fix the problem. 27% of the PC calls require someone to end up going to that person's location to fix the issue. As I said in the beginning, you know, I'm not the Mac guy at IBM, right? I'm responsible for all platforms and delivering the best experience possible on all of those. This is just what we observe as a result of implementing employee choice in a Mac program at IBM. We saw a 10-point year-over-year increase in employee engagement, and one of the #1 reasons people listed was better tools from IT, which we really think means the Employee Choice and Mac program. And 73% of all employees responded that they would like their next machine to be a Mac. Incidentally, we will be well over 100,000 Macs by the end of the year, making IBM the world's largest deployment of enterprise Macs. And every model of Mac that we buy is a significant net savings to IBM versus a comparable Windows PC configured the same way.
Now, one of the things that we've noticed for organizations who implement Mac choice programs, because Windows has long been in the organization, they sort of had their method of management completed there. And when they were bringing in Mac, a lot of you actually, I had a couple customers tell me yesterday that you put a technology team off to the side to not simply come up with a Mac management program, but with rethinking IT and actually using some concepts that came out of your mobile management to really rethink IT. And then after deploying those Macs, bringing those same concepts, as Brad was talking, over to the Windows side as well, and IBM is doing that, and so are several other organizations. Now, Fletcher's presentation has inspired many, and of course, after that presentation, not like immediately after it, but between then and now, Fletcher was promoted to CIO of IBM. I'm not suggesting that when you present at JNUC that your career path is going straight to CIO of your organization, but we do have one good example, so take that for what it's worth. But he has inspired many, and I've heard from so many of you, hey, I want to be the next Fletcher, I want to be the next IBM in your deployment. But some people say, yeah, but that's IBM. We're not IBM. You know, we're not a tech company or what have you. So we thought we would want to hear from a few other individuals at JNUC this year. So I'd like to introduce 4 people who are advancing the Mac Choice program, or user choice within the enterprise across the world, starting with the Vice President of Enterprise Mobility with IT Services from SAP, Martin Lang, the Director of Engineering for Capital One, Ryan Kremkow, the technical expert for Apple at a little startup company that you might know named Walmart, Miles Lacey. And speaking of little startups, a little firm out of Cupertino from worldwide product marketing for Mac OS and iOS, Jeremy Butcher. Please welcome our panel. So we've got a lot of expertise here. Martin, you traveled far. They're going to notice as soon as you speak, so why don't you let everybody know just where you're from?
I'm from Germany.
Germany, where in Germany?
Waldorf, Germany, which is where SAP's headquarters is.
Okay, awesome. And you actually, within your organization, we were talking earlier about how managing Mac and sometimes joins the organization that manages mobile devices as well. So you have responsibility for all of the Mac management and all of iOS and all of the other mobile devices too, correct?
That's true, yes.
Okay.
We call ourselves Enterprise Mobility, but we started with developing apps, then added a team that manages mobile devices, and then 2 years ago also added a team that we call the Mac COE that manages Macs. And the Mac folks are totally cool with the overall team being called Enterprise Mobility. That's how we look at Macs.
Well, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, some of the MacBooks are smaller than the 13-inch iPads. I'm not sure why one's a mobile device and the other isn't a mobile device, so that completely works for me. But within SAP, you offer choice for employees. Let me just start right there. Why did SAP make this decision to allow employees who are coming in or refreshing to choose the computer that they're going to use?
Yeah, I think to some extent I would say we don't think we really have a choice. You know, as a software company, a global business leader, you know, in offering business software, we have to offer that kind of choice. You know, people expect that they can use a Mac at SAP. We offer a choice, obviously, also for mobile devices. Our CIO has a quote that was out there on apple.com/business where he says, offering Mac as a choice is a key for any modern enterprise. And inside SAP, it has helped him as the CIO, you know, to change the perception of IT that we offer that choice.
How many Mac do you have?
13,000, just shy of 13,000.
13,000. And we can say that we don't have a choice to do it as a business. I think that is where the world is going. But what challenges does that create for IT when you do offer choice to employees?
Yeah, I think it's a slightly different culture that we figure we need to have in the team to offer that kind of choice. That's part of the reason why we moved the Mac team from the more traditional IT team that it was in before, that supports Windows devices, to my team, which is enterprise mobility. The team setup, I think, is very different, and that is initially challenging. Now it becomes a benefit. It's not just Mac admins, which we are blessed to have a bunch of really good guys on the team, but we also have storytellers on the team. We have designers, things like this. So what we have to deal with to offer that choice is a lot of, we run up against a lot of myths, with our employees and also our managers that come up with similar notions of what Fletcher addressed last year, and we can't just point to the IBM story. That's not good enough, we need to make it our own story. So we also have some folks on the team that are more like data scientists, they look at the data we have to make this our own story, to say how does the total cost of ownership look like at SAP, and we want to, we are actually right now working with HR to make choice not just an IT program, which it already is, but to also make it an HR program at the same time, so that folks who join SAP very officially from HR can get the choice, and that all of the decision makers behind the scenes know why we do it and how we do it.
Awesome, awesome.
Hey, Martin, can you speak a little bit to some of the unique requirements that Mac users have within SAP?
Yeah, I think Mac users, many of our Mac users have been Mac users for a long time, even before they joined SAP, right? And they are used to, when an upgrade comes out, with lots of new functionality, they're used to load that upgrade right away. They want their Mac just as fast as their Mac at home, so they revolt when we do anything to the Mac that makes it appear slower. They also, Mac users generally inside SAP, I assume this is true for other organizations too, but they are generally very vocal, so we need to offer them feedback channels.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm telling you, man, you are. I said yesterday, you're a passionate group, and you are.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So we offer these feedback channels. We have something like what you guys have as the Jamf Nation website. We have something just like that internally at SAP, and about 60% of our Mac users have decided to join that community and to be very much in the loop when anything happens, anything new comes out, or any issue appears, to give us that feedback.
All right. Let's switch gears to Ryan for a moment. So Ryan is a serial user choice Mac implementer, in that he first did it for Expedia, where they deployed thousands of Mac. Then he went on to Nike, where they've deployed thousands of Mac. And now he's with Capital One, where they've deployed thousands of Mac. So if there's like one person you grab and you go, tell me about the journey of what you went through, Ryan is probably the guy. First of all, the same question that we have for Martin in terms of what the user expectations are. What do you find the user expectations are for your typical Mac user?
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I think they definitely have a different set of expectations. A lot of that is born, obviously, from thanks to Apple, obviously, right? Apple Retail, I think, has done a really great job making the expectations very high for everybody. But I think what we see, in addition to the expectations that they have, kind of that simple, intuitive, ease of use, being able to just take it out of the box and use it day one, they expect that same thing when they go to work. And really the focus, at most places is to try to get to that same level of kind of experience for the users. I think what it's also done, though, is it's essentially elevated the expectations across IT in general. We've seen, especially as you kind of get that feedback from your Mac users, obviously they're more demanding, to Martin's point.
Yeah.
They're more vocal. I think we have a Slack channel. We have a couple other methods for our users to give us feedback. We have some of our engineers are out here in this audience, and they can probably attest to impending dumpster fires that are in that channel that they put out regularly. But I think, the Mac users are obviously the most vocal. So we've seen it elevate all of IT. I think, one of the best examples in something that didn't exist even a few years ago for most companies is even the concept of support. So the Genius Bar, a lot of companies have adopted that. And really, that's raised your level of support for all your users. You don't just have a Genius Bar just for Mac users, right? You have your, we have Power Up, Nike had performance bars. Most companies nowadays have a place where folks can go get support, same day, same time that they're there. And it's been fantastic because I think experientially, you're giving that to all of your users. It's not just your Mac community.
And how many Mac do you have today?
We have about 12,000 or so.
And are one of the questions I was going to have for you, how do you get feedback from users? You have Slack channels with the users of the Mac, and is that how they provide you feedback?
Yeah, we have a Macintosh Slack channel, but I personally, I've only been at Capital One for about a year. One of the methods that I do, I obviously like to meet with different lines of business and try to understand some of the challenges that those different lines of business have. The folks that I actually like to meet with the most are the folks that don't have Macs in our company. A lot of companies, when they're first starting Mac program, you're going to get that initial wave of Mac users that they want Macs, right? Yeah. That's kind of there's a demand or pent up demand. You start making choice and they immediately adopt. What happens after that, though, is you end up with a very large set of users, right? We have 12,000, but we also have 50 some odd thousand folks that are still on Windows. Those folks, reaching out to them to understand what might be preventing them from using the Mac platform is absolutely something that I'm interested at anywhere, especially at Capital One, because it's historically been a very Windows-focused company. Once you start to get some of that feedback, hey, we have this application, or it's this system, or we're tied to this tool that just there isn't that equivalent on the Mac platform, you can start to peel back and start to really realize what you need to work on as an organization to enable all those folks to have a choice. They may not decide to go to a Mac. Maybe it is still better to stay on Windows. And I obviously would argue you want to make sure that your Windows platform is just as good of an experience as the Mac one, but at least giving them that choice and having it not be an impediment, or not having the roadblocks there that prevent them from moving is one of it. And then my last piece is get friendly with, if you have admins at your place of business, get friendly with them. I feel like what we've done, especially here, is I've worked a lot with our admin community. We have a massive one. And oddly enough, they know a lot about your users that you may not necessarily be aware of. We had almost our entire admin community was on Windows. It was for very, very specific reasons. I think we did a lot to change some of that. We dispelled a lot of myths. And now we have not a massive, but probably about 15% of our admin community is on Macs now, which is a large win for me. I don't think that most people kind of forget about that community, but they help drive adoption as well, because they work with your executives, they work with all your other lines of business and teams regularly. So getting them on board, getting them to use it as well is a good way in the door.
Awesome.
Hey, Ryan, so speaking of executives, we did a profile of Capital One. It's on Apple.com. It's all these folks talking about choice as something that you guys really value. Was that always how it was, or was there some convincing that went along with that process? Could you explain that a little bit?
I think, can you hear me? So I think, the video, one of the parts that I like about it, Frank, who's our CSO, he specifically said that, he has a quote in there, I think, that says something to the tune of, money is often not the prime objective for most people. It's what they do with their money, and that it's an emotional choice. I think we actually embrace that probably to the highest level, especially within IT at Capital One, where I don't know that we're necessarily concerned with how the folks get there. We're more interested in what we're doing to enable them to be productive. That video especially not goes out of its way, but is mostly about giving users the choice on where the tools that they use, the hardware that they want to use, and where they're also using it. And you know, I kind of have a story. When I first started, we had some teams that were trying to build personas. So we were trying to essentially put all of our employees into kind of these 4 buckets, where it was like, you know, knowledge worker, highly skilled, whatever it was. And as soon as I saw that, I think that was one of the first things that I tried to back out of as quickly as possible, because I just don't think that you can try to make people more productive by trying to file them into a single category and then give them the tools that you think that they need from an IT perspective. You need to let them be the ones that choose and be the ones that tell you what they need. Obviously, I think the culture there is a little bit further along than some places in delivering that. We obviously have, you know, very flexible, wide open workspaces. You know, we obviously offer Macs as a choice. We have iOS and Android. You know, kind of pick your flavor. But really, the theme was that you know, don't try to define what productive looks like. I think it's fine for leadership, especially, to define what maybe success looks like for the company. But as far as, you know, figuring out what productivity looks like from the users, you really need to let them decide.
Oh, just out of curiosity, what's more difficult, convincing leadership to allow choice, convincing users that they can move to the Mac, or convincing IT that it needed to have less control and allow the users to have a little bit more, try to do less prescriptive and to give perhaps a little bit more freedom, but yet have the controls that you need? Mike? No, that's for you. Ryan. Yeah, I was just curious. You were riffing on that a little bit. So I'm just sort of, as you work with IT change, leadership change, user change. I mean, just quick answer. What's the toughest part?
The toughest part is information security.
Information security. Yeah.
You know, we have a special, I'll call it, set of challenges in that we have fun people called bank regulators, and they like to come around and wave their audit wands and make things really, really complicated for us. And you know, you could come up with the most elegant solution on the planet. You could offer the most choice. You could throw every device and every tool and everything out there, and they will find a way to crush your dreams. And what I learned really quickly, and this is not just a Capital One specific thing, but you know, and actually Jennifer, who's on our team, has talked in the past at JNUC about being friends with information security. And it's true. You know, I think I've spent a majority of my time this last year really getting to know information security, getting to know what their requirements are, forcing them to actually give me requirements as opposed to just blanket saying, no, that I don't like that. And once you start to convince them that it's not the worst thing on the planet, right? You go to enough meetings and they say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then you bust out your iPhone and take a screenshot of highly sensitive data, and then they freak out. You know, part of it's myth, you know, to what kind of Martin talked about a little bit, but yeah, I would say information security is probably your biggest challenge, especially in leadership.
Well, let's get to Miles. Miles, unlike SAP and Capital One, you actually haven't rolled out Choice yet, but you've made a decision in that area. You want to quickly just take people through how many Macs do you have at Walmart today, and what decision have you made around Employee Choice?
Sure. So today we've got about 7,000 Macs distributed globally, and we have made the decision to go to Choice. It is still in process, and those of us who have been around rooms like this for a long time, we know all the numbers, right? We know the argument, and we know that it makes sense. But when IBM and Fletcher brought their presentation to the world, and that started getting put not only in tech journals, but in all the business publications, and the C-suite were reading this, and the VPs were reading this, and they're saying, oh, what these nerds were saying is actually true. So, there you go. So we took that as a foot in the door to bring that knowledge to those folks and say, yeah, well, we've known this and we know how to do it, so let's get it done. And you know, we've run the same numbers. We're seeing a 60-40 split between support efforts for Windows versus Macs. So they're demonstrably cheaper and easier to manage. So it's a pretty easy decision. But to some of the other points, right, it's not an easy implementation, especially in an older organization that's built in a Windows-focused way. And to echo the sentiments about information security, make friends with them, but also provide them with education, right? Because if you've got a Windows-focused group, right, they're used to doing things a certain way, maybe they've got a certain command and control mindset, talk to your Apple reps, right? Get information in front of them, let them understand the Apple security posture and why it is secure and how to address the security needs of this different platform.
And you have, only at Walmart is 6,000 Mac a start, first of all. And for clarity, you've made the decision that, in a few months you are going to announce Choice for employees at Walmart?
Yep, we're working very hard on that. We don't have a date to talk about, but it's a very active project that we're working with Jamf and with Apple to get done.
Miles might get a few emails after this.
Entirely possible. I grabbed Miles about 10 times and said, is your corp com okay with you? With that said, but you've told me on the phone, you said, hey, I've got the support of my leadership team. But I can't imagine that was always the case. No. So is it back to kind of what happened in the business journals? Did you use that to your benefit to go in and lobby for a decision in this area?
Yeah, so that was a huge part of it. And a lot of it was just time. A lot of it was reorg, just new blood, different faces. But certainly, any big organization, you probably have folks who are sort of set in their old ways. But we have a great alignment right now of folks who either have been around for a while and get it, or who have come in and get it. Mm-hmm. And so now we're very well positioned that way. So the thing I'll offer to folks who need to still make those arguments is, again, make friends with the various stakeholders, but it's hard to argue with facts if the facts are irrefutable. All right, so certain things like the numbers, the percentages, the cost savings, as well as the benefits, right, that folks are seeing right now that IBM's a few years in, and we've got other organizations that we can look to and say, hey, how's that going? And the answers are almost entirely positive.
Awesome. And for clarity, so your mantra externally is, I forget exactly, low prices every day.
Everyday low prices, right? So you'll see that on all the Walmart advertising. And so we focus on cost internally, like we say, everyday low cost, right? And that's another sort of point of learning where to some folks, certainly not everybody, but to some folks, it's easy to focus on that invoice number, right? Because it's still true today, if you just look at the invoice, the cost of a computer, right? A Mac generally is a little more expensive than the PC you might buy. But if you look at the TCO, if you look at all these other reports, all the stuff that's been published for years at this point, right? The cost of deploying and supporting a Mac is a lot less than a Windows box.
So Dean mentioned how Fletcher's got this great story about IBM, and that there's a lot of folks that look at that and say, if IBM can do it, we can do it. And then there's a lot of folks that say, well, it's IBM, of course they can do it, we could never do that because we're not IBM. I think a lot of folks would put Walmart in that other category. How does that play out for you guys? Because clearly that's not happening.
Right. Again, it's very much facts, right? So the numbers are out there. It's an easy argument to make at this point that it just makes good business sense.
Cool. Back to you, Martin. You're deploying globally, obviously everywhere. Quickly, does that present any unique challenges to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's some of what we already, I think, talked about. I think for us, it's not information security at SAP. That's not the biggest thing. We do work with security very tightly, but it's convincing all the local executives all around the world that this makes sense, and that the invoice number, as you called it, Miles, for us, it's the number that shows up in your shopping cart when you order something. That this is not the only truth to it. To convince those folks, that's where like I said earlier, we want to work with HR also to make this to put it up on billboards. Ultimately that this is a program that IT runs together with HR and to make it all successful at the end. I think we have other challenges, obviously, in the Office 365 space also. I think folks who use this with Skype and with Outlook on the Mac, but Microsoft Teams have been super responsive, and it is right now. We can right now offer that choice. If we would have talked just 2 years ago, the choice was much harder to argue. So that helped us a lot. We do also look at a lot of numbers. I think numbers came up, I think, for all three of us, but that takes an effort, of course, right, to look at what IBM does as an inspiration, but then you really to find out what are your own numbers. How is the TCO from an SAP perspective? Do we where does the money go that we get after selling a 4-year-old Mac or a Windows machine to a third-party vendor, and where's this money going? And we get more money back for a Mac that we sell after 3 years, right? And the support tickets, how does that really look like? What is the cost of a ticket? And this is not something that is done on the Windows side. It's kind of not needed, but we need to, because we do have that higher purchase price number, so we need to make that effort to understand people that this choice makes just a lot of sense from an overall company perspective globally.
That makes sense. Other than the cost side, we know of another business benefit, because I actually have a screen clip in this deck, because you guys tweet it, your team tweets this. And so it's what do you call this screenshot? Let's bring it up here for everybody.
Yeah, so what you look at is what we call apple pies. And apple pies is, it's a creative name the team came up with, my Mac CUE. It's what it is. It's SAP UI5 technology on the front end. So that's what you see there in blue. We embedded it in this case, of course, in the self-service. I wish we could have a cool-looking self-service like you guys have with Jamf 10. But I guess next week,
you can have that cool self-service.
So this will look much cooler. This is one way of how we look at numbers, and so it's SAP UI5 on the front end, but then it uses Jamf APIs, which you guys make available to us to consume those numbers. And the interesting thing with this is we decided for Apple Pies to make this available not just for us as an internal monitoring tool, but for all employees. So any SAP, any of those 13,000 Macs, if they open their self-service, I think you call these things plugins, right, at the left side. So it's in there.
Bookmarks in 10.
Oh, bookmarks, yeah. Sorry. I still need to get up to speed on some of this. But so it's a bookmark right there, and you can also this is embedded in the Fiori Launchpad as well, which is a way that even SAP Windows people could look at that themselves too, And on this chart specifically, we look at the Mac OS adoption, and you pointed out, I think earlier, that it is quite cool. I of course I'm quite proud of that too, that I think technically 97% or something of our devices are on a Mac OS release that's younger than a year. There is already that blue bucket that you see there. This is High Sierra. So we are currently at about 15-16% of Macs that are already on High Sierra, and basically everybody else is on Sierra.
If we were just a month ago, that pie chart would probably have even more orange with everybody on the most current release.
Yeah, of course, because all the guys who went on High Sierra, they were on Sierra just a few weeks ago. Yeah.
And I'm sure apple pies, the pun translates perfectly into German, right?
Yeah.
Think about that. That's a world not just with the Mac, though. I mean, it's with Apple, and it gets overlooked sometimes. The notion that you have 90, it would have, again, a month ago, it would have all been yellow, that you have 96, 97% of your entire fleet of 13,000 on the exact same release. It is an amazing thing about Apple. And like I said, I first noticed this because some of the team at SAP tweeted it. But we actually have a video in here I'm going to advance to, which is another thing the SAP team tweeted, and it's not with the Mac, it's with the Apple TV. And while it plays, the setup for the Apple TV, just describe. I mentioned yesterday that more and more organizations are deploying Apple TVs. Describe what's happening here.
We very much think the Apple TV is going to be a great enterprise device as well. So the team, what they did is with Jamf and with DEP, we were able to essentially, the way this looks now, I was quite blown away. You get an Apple TV from the Apple Store, or you take it out of the box, you plug in an Ethernet cable, and what you saw just here, it's already done. It said SAP wants to configure your Apple TV. The whole configuration happens automatically. The only thing you really need to do is to plug in an Ethernet cable. And then I think this video ran very quickly.
It ran too fast, I'm sorry.
But it really is so fast. What you saw, maybe if you paid attention, is you saw an app show up that looked like a butler. There it was on the right side, the assistant app.
Sorry, we've made it all so fast.
Yeah, but you saw it, and I'm sure there's a replay. But we call it the assistant. We call it the assistant app, and the assistant app is pushed to the Apple TV to finalize the configuration. So the user themselves can call the Apple TV. In this case, we call the team Awesome. That's what my Mac CE calls themselves. But you could call it whatever marketing team or whatever to make this Apple TV your own. And you decide whether it's going to be a conference room setup where it's just AirPlay. That's what you saw in this setup. Or whether you want the Apple TV open to do apps on the Apple TV. And we are still working on this. We will ship apps, internal apps for the Apple TV, and we think it's not just a device for conference rooms, that we hopefully get rid of all these adapter bundles that we currently see in our conference rooms, but we think it's very much also a device that I want to see on all screens around the enterprise, also in cafeterias, in hands-on rooms, whatever, for teams to advertise maybe internal success stories on there. So there's lots of apps, I think, that we will build for the Apple TV, and that I think other people will also build to make this an enterprise device. And the setup is just so simple. Now I'm quite excited. We haven't really made this generally available in SAP, but we plan to do this in the remainder of this year, and lots of people are going to love this.
Yeah, the video happened so fast, and just not only is it cool that it just sets up automatically, but you did something unique in it, and it is available. If you search Twitter, you can find it. That you actually come up in single app mode, and you say, what is this going to be used for? And the user clicks it, and then it must throw it into a smart group and then automatically load it in. And we've seen examples of that. As a matter of fact, in the next panel discussion, you're going to see another example of that. More and more organizations are doing it. But we're coming up to the top of the hour. We got to wrap here pretty soon. So why don't I just open it up for a moment. And Jeremy, if you have any other questions for the panelists, or if you have any questions for each other, or a final point that you want to make about your implementation, I'll just open it up to everybody.
I mean, one thing that I just want to throw out to the group, and it's something that I think we've seen quite a bit, is you get to the phase where you've convinced people that this is something you want to do, and they say, yes, we totally agree. All you have to do is this, this, and this, that are all kind of diametrically opposed to the vision that you've just sold them on. How do you go about keeping everybody in line on the vision? Maybe, Miles, you can talk about that for a second.
Sure. So it kind of goes back to what I mentioned about educating these stakeholders. Security is a big one, but there's plenty of others, business units that have needs for a legacy app or what have you. And so it's a lot of educating folks on how do these devices work, what's the security posture, what are the apps that are available, and if I want to have custom apps in the organization, right, as folks here are presenting and you've heard about forever, it's easy, right? If you have a development team, right, you can build your own app. Apple has these things available for you. But that's a shift that you've got to help engender within those groups, within those development groups, security groups, to adopt these Apple ways of doing things.
Let's just do a real quick closing on some rapid fire. I just spoke with you, Martin, so I'm going to go with Ryan. Number one myth that you have to dispel when you go through this program, real quickly.
Wow, there's
I just put you way on
there's
way
so
under the
many
gun
options
there.
on the spot. Number one myth, the cost thing is probably the number one myth by a long shot. It's also not true that if you open up your entire network space to 17 WAC 8 that you can get on our network through the Apple Store network.
Thank you. Miles, big organization, you're going to offer choice. Any projection, any expectation at all in terms of what level of interest, percentages, or what have you, of the employees that you'll see that will be interested in that?
Sure. So if we see the same rates of adoption that we've seen in Fletcher's presentation and other organizations that we've spoken to, this time next year we would probably be managing around 100,000 Macs.
Who wants to see Miles present in this session next year? Yeah. Jeremy, I'll give you last word.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know a lot of you are off in different parts of this journey, so wherever you are, just keep pushing forward. I think question why things need to work the way that they do. Because it's the way we've always done it is not always the best answer. And you can see the team here up on stage is really good at doing that, so keep at it.
All right. Thank you very much to our panelists. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
So I want to switch gears now, talk a little bit about transformation within organizations, and one of the industries that we just have a great deal of passion for is healthcare. And so I would like to bring up a Jamf who, even though our organization has a passion for healthcare, she has a very special passion for healthcare. So please help me welcome Jenny Asaba.
All right, thank you so much, Dean, and good morning, everyone. Quick question, everybody having a good time at JNUC? Right? Great. Lots of good information. So as Dean mentioned, I am super excited to be here, talk about some of the amazing ways that our customers are helping shape the healthcare landscape. So last year at this time, we heard an incredible story from the University of California, San Diego Health about their plan to unveil a first-of-its-kind implementation at their new facility, Jacobs Medical Center. Their plan included having an iPad and Apple TV in each of their hospitals, 245 patient rooms, and using the iPads, patients could access their medical records, they could call a nurse, they could play games, stay connected to family through a variety of social apps, access TV, movies, much more. UCSD couldn't be with us this year for an update, so we sent Dean with his iPhone out to them, and he chatted with their Director of IS Experience and Development, Mark Silvestrak, about the success they've seen at Jacobs Medical Center over the last year. So we're going to show you a quick video about that conversation. It's going to start with a little snippet from last year's JNUC, so you may recognize that, and then move into the conversation that he had with Dean just a couple weeks ago. So let's take a look.
Just over a year ago, we were presented with an opportunity to offer up tablets to our patients. What we're doing is we're giving them an application on a tablet that allows them access to their inpatient records. So this gives them access to their lab results, gives them access to the medication they're taking, who's taking care of them, what their schedule looks like, that sort of thing. All right, so Jacobs Medical Center is a 245-bed facility that's opening up, as I mentioned, next month. Each room in this hospital is a private room. Each room will have a 60-inch, I think roughly 60-inch flat screen TV. And we are placing a Apple TV behind every TV, and we'll be putting an iPad tablet in every single room. And we wanted to make it as a comfortable stay as possible for them. And we feel that we've achieved this, or we're going to achieve this. We'll report back next JNUC.
Hi, my name is Mark Silvestrak. I am the Director of IS Experience and Development for UC San Diego Health. I have been here for just over 27 years. And I was the lead, the technical lead for our iPad rollout at our Jacobs Medical Center facility, which we opened last year. November 20th, we opened up 245 rooms, 245 tablets. We turned them on, and we had access to things like Netflix, their patient portal, their bedside information. We also do provide access to a room control app that allows them to control their blinds, their lights, their TV, their room temperature as well. In each one of these tablets, again, is configured specifically for that room. You can't walk out with that tablet into another room and control the TV, the blinds, or anything like that. It is specific for that room. And that's all done through Jamf. And through an interface that we have, an ADT interface, to our Jamf server, we are able to now, on discharge and transfer, auto-wipe all of our tablets. And this is seriously an ROI that we can see just from an FTE standpoint. We've done that over 9,100 times in the last 6 months, and it has been beautiful. It has truly been, it's been the thing that people have been more interested in. And I've probably given, I'm gonna say, anywhere from half a dozen to 10 tours of our facility. Our overall HCAP scores have improved. So it could be it's a new facility. We like to believe it's because we have an iPad in every single room. So that's what we're going with. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a perfect rollout, 1 being couldn't have been any worse, I would have to give this a 9. I think it went beyond our expectations in a positive way for sure.
How do you guys think Dean did with his iPhone? Pretty good, right? Not too bad. Well, we are thrilled that the Patient Experience Project has gone so well at UCSD, and we absolutely love that others have taken notice of their success and are transforming healthcare in their own spaces using Apple and Jamf. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome 3 of our customers who are helping make this work possible to this year's JNUC stage. So from Geisinger Health, we have James Raffel. The Bungie Foundation, welcome Christine Edwards. And from Orthology, welcome to JNUC, Paul Julius. So James, you introduced a patient bedside initiative at Geisinger, provides more than 350 iPads throughout 24 units across 6 of the system's facilities, which is great. It's all designed to offer a better patient experience. And Geisinger has always been well known for forward-thinking initiatives within healthcare, but can you talk a little bit about why in particular you decided to implement this bedside initiative?
Sure. So about 3 years ago, we were presented by our operational leadership a challenge to come up with something that can provide education and information to our patients through the TV that was in the room at the time. Just about that same time, our electronic medical record company came out with an app that only runs on iOS. So mixing the two together, we were presented with an opportunity to create our interactive patient system based on iPads and Apple TVs in the rooms.
And you've been offering iPads to patients since April of 2015, like you said, through the interactive patient system. How do you know it's actually making a difference and creating a better experience for your patients?
Well, one thing we do is we ask. So we put a survey on the iPads, and we ask the patients or their families. We have iPads across adult and pediatric units. So parents, family members can utilize the iPads as well in the rooms. And that feedback, in addition to, we like to round and get into, obviously not into the patient care aspect of things, but to hear from the patient. So we were talking about the voice of the employee. In this case, it's the voice of our patients. And so hearing from them, getting feedback, apps that they're interested in, that they would have liked to have seen, or that they think would help improve the situation.
Great. Like you mentioned, in addition to providing patient information, unit information, information about Geisinger, the surrounding area, you offer more than 100 apps for patient use. You also do something really unique at Geisinger, and that's allowing all of your patients to log into their devices with their own Apple ID. We don't see that everywhere. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to make that choice?
Sure. So originally, as I said, it went across pediatric and adult floors. And on the pediatric side of things, kids with technology today, they get very comfortable with certain apps, certain TV shows that they have access to. And one of the primary driving forces behind this were our child life therapists who work with kids to distract them, to make them more comfortable in that setting. So allowing allowing the parents, or depending on who has the Apple ID, the ability to use it on the devices and load what they want. It's worked out okay now because with Apple Music, they can access their music as well. But at the time, it was paid apps that we weren't putting onto the iPads. And then we wipe them in between use, so there's no danger of somebody keeping their Apple ID. So it's worked out well so far.
Great, yeah, and that's huge benefits to the patients there. One question we hear in hospitals, well, how is this affecting your staff? So does having an iPad in each room really create more work for your care teams?
It depends. That's my favorite IT answer. It depends on who. It depends on who you're asking. For the staff, we do get feedback initially that it is just another thing that keeps them away from their clinical care. But then over time, they realize right now, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but right now, they have to take a step of taking it to a Mac Mini and reloading it, which takes about 5 minutes, and then it gets returned to the room. And we've seen different units do different things, from nursing staff to desk clerks or other people that can handle that. And then from there, they start to see the benefits of possibly lower call bells so that they can do more nursing functionality, or just better patient satisfaction.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about how implementing Jamf specifically has helped Geisinger really achieve this mission to create a better patient experience?
Sure. So when we started, we had already had Jamf in place to manage our Macs, and it was a big part of being able to deliver a lot of the content. And as was touched on before, our information security folks were not too enamored of this whole idea of putting a Geisinger-owned device into patient hands. That scared them. But through talking to them, explaining to them how we're safeguarding them, using Jamf and the configurations and the content being able to push, it worked very well. And we're now what I like to call version 2, where we've leveraged self-service. And through self-service, we've kind of expanded the app availability. We have provided more content for the patients in a much shorter time. As I said, the reload process is now 5 minutes, where it used to be a lot longer. And then with version 3, hopefully in the next month, we're going to be implementing Healthcare Listener to take the reload process out of the hands of the staff and make our information security folks even happier, because once you take it out of human hands, it becomes a little more, a little safer.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story. We really appreciate it. Our next speaker comes from American video game developer, you may have heard of them, Bungie. Well known for the creation of a suite of popular video games, including Halo and Destiny. Anybody ever heard of Halo or Destiny? Maybe? Good. You have some fans. So you wouldn't necessarily associate them with healthcare, right? But in 2010, Bungie said, we're going to create the Bungie Foundation. And they really did that to focus on helping reduce the distress and pain that children experienced while they were in the hospital, and that's through entertainment. So here to explain how they're helping make this vision a reality is their Senior Foundation Manager, Christine Edwards.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, Christine. Really appreciate it. So Bungie, as I mentioned, first and foremost, video game developer. Why does Bungie want to be in the healthcare space?
Yeah, so for a long time, I think Bungie has had a really strong desire and really a strong sense of responsibility to give back to our community in a really meaningful and tangible way. And in order to do that, we started our nonprofit foundation, the Bungie Foundation. And we know interactive entertainment. We've been in that space for a long time, so it made sense for us to focus in that area. And working with kids and helping really reduce that distress and suffering in children was something that we could all rally behind, something that we could all feel passionate about. So we in 2012, 2013, reached out to our local children's hospital, Seattle Children's Hospital, and asked what we could do in the entertainment space, what they needed for their kids, and subsequently we started the iPads for Kids program.
That's great. And when you guys first started, you were manually wiping and re-enrolling every single device every single time a kid needed a device. I can imagine you guys wouldn't find that to be the best way to run a program and especially create a plug-and-play program that you want to scale over time. So realizing that that really wasn't going to work long-term, what did you do? What steps came next?
Yeah, so we really had a bigger vision of expanding to other hospitals around the country, and we knew that we couldn't do it the way that we were doing it. So we started researching a lot of different MDM providers and really had minimal success in finding something that worked for the program that we were trying to provide. And we finally reached out to Apple and we said, like, please help us. What do we need to do? Who do we need to talk to? And they asked us if we had spoken to Jamf. So we spoke to Jamf and quickly learned that not only did they have the exact program, the exact software that we needed to manage our program the way that we wanted to, but they also had this really incredible team to guide us through this process and to be really strong advocates for the program and to really become one of our biggest partners.
So can you walk us through a little bit of how it works? When a patient comes in their room and they pick up their iPad, what happens next? What's the process?
Yeah, so they'll pick up that iPad, they'll walk through a simple setup process, selecting their location, their language, and Wi-Fi. At that point, Jamf will take control of the device, wiping it of all standard iPad content, and will lock it into single app mode. The patient or their family will go into that app, select their developmental age, using a custom app that Jamf has created for our program. They'll select some terms of service, and once they do that, age-appropriate content will download directly onto that device for the patient to use for the duration of their stay. There's actually 3 ways that they can consume that content. The first is through that initial content deployment. The second is through age-appropriate apps that we can place into self-service. And the third is through WebClip that actually redirects you to into a request form where you can request new content from us and we can deploy it directly to your device. Then the patient will check out, healthcare listener will wipe and reset that iPad back to factory setting, and we're off to the races for the next patient.
And since kicking off this program, you've estimated that you've helped probably about 123,000 kids at Seattle Children's alone. I mean, that's incredible numbers. So what's next for the program?
Yeah, so just in this next year, our goal is to reach 8 more hospitals, which we anticipate will be about 125,000 new patients just in the next 12 months alone. And long term, our goal is to really be in every children's hospital across the country.
Amazing. Right? So if you ever wondered if you're doing the right thing, there you go. Everybody with kids is very, very excited. So currently 5 of the top 10 children's hospitals in the U.S. have chosen Apple and Jamf, and the Bungee Foundation is working to get iPads, like you said, in every children's hospital in the U.S. But tell me, is it really possible, really, to scale this program that big?
It's crazy to think, but it actually is, which is why we're so excited to partner with Jamf, because it really is Jamf software that allows us to scale this program infinitely across the country. And it's definitely worth mentioning that this program is not an easy thing necessarily to implement, even with a perfect program like Jamf. There's still a lot of those complications that we're talking about with information security and HIPAA compliancy and all of those concerns that you need to assuage and all those myths that you need to dispel. So it's not only is it the program that we're relying on, but it actually is relying on Jamf's staff as well and their expertise to really guide us through this process and be a part of our journey on so many calls with so many hospitals, answering all those questions alongside us to help us navigate those waters. So we're really excited about our partnership and super excited to see where the program goes.
And we are as well. Speaking from everybody from Jamf, we are very, very pleased and very happy to help you guys achieve your mission. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of your story. So hearing from the Bungee Foundation, their goal of scaling to every children's hospital in the U.S. is a great segue to our next speaker who knows all about the importance of scalability. From Startup Orthology, Paul Julius is here to share how implementing Jamf now allowed them to scale and see success in a different sector in the healthcare market. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Thank you.
So you personally are currently using Jamf now to manage 200 devices, over 14 clinics that offer physical therapy, sports medicine, chiropractic services to patients. So as orthology continues to grow and expand more locations, how confident are you that Jamf Now is going to scale with you to meet all of your mobile device management needs?
Jamf Now is an extremely reliable program for orthology, for device management. We use Apple products in all 3 areas of our treatment, which are the actual treatment of the patient, the online scheduling, and the check-in process for patients. And it works very well for our IMACs, for our front desk staff and our patient coordinators. The check-in process where the patient is given an iPad to complete check-in when they come in for a new evaluation. And then with our providers, all our providers, whether they're a chiropractor or a physical therapist, they have an iPad in front of them as they're treating the patient, and they complete their notes after they treat on an iPad.
Great. And much like Bungie, you guys didn't have a super clean start to when you began implementing your iPads. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the technological pain points you experienced during that time?
Apple IDs were everywhere. So it was quite painful getting up and running originally. We had maxed out our Apple IDs. We have 14 locations across 2 different markets, and each of those clinics are pretty far away from each other. So it's very difficult to coordinate IT consulting, our internal staff, to go to those locations. So we really didn't have a great solution prior to Jamf.
Sounds like you needed one. So can you tell me a little bit about what was so appealing for Jamf Now in particular?
So we looked at about 5 different software packages, and all had their strengths and weaknesses. But what really came down to is when we were going through these and we pulled up, we were able to test Jamf on my personal devices, and when I was speaking to our management team about it, I was able to show this is how easy it is, this is how we can move forward, this is how we can move and scale with our growth path and get up and running quickly, to maintain HIPAA compliance and make our providers that more happier.
Mm-hmm. And Orthology is currently using 3 main apps to run your business, and those are Dr. Chrono, PhysiTrad, and DialPad. And in what way does Jamf Now in particular allow you to be very successful with those 3 apps?
So those apps cover all areas of our in-clinic business, our health records, telecom, and then the experience the patient has afterwards, which is their home exercise programs, and their outcome measures, so they can see what's going on. Very, very into showing the patient what is actually happening. And 2 of those, Dr. Chrono and PhysiTrack, are Apple Mobility partners. So they spend a lot of time honing their apps, and Jamf really allows us to focus on the training and operations associated around the apps and not the devices.
So now that you've been using Jamf Now for about a year, can you speak to the overall of how it's really helped Orthology thrive?
It's been great. I think healthcare, you're always very, very concerned about security of your devices, and Jamf being able to encrypt, auto-lock all your devices and do that quickly and take care of an iPad if something's lost is very important. But the thing that I'm most excited about is that it has allowed IT to focus more on helping the patient experience, the provider experience, and allowing them to take, use their time otherwise than speaking with IT. And if they are speaking with IT, more to be about, ways to make their life better rather than explaining to me what's actually going on.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us, Paul.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. At Jamf, we're really excited, as we've said, and we're truly honored to be a part of each of your stories. You guys are helping transform the healthcare industry and make it better for patients. So thank you for allowing us to join that journey with you. All right, so now that you've had an opportunity to hear from some of our healthcare customers, we also want you to learn about some of the awesome way our education customers are transforming their industry. So to guide that conversation, please help me welcome former teacher, tech leader, and Jamf's liaison with our EDU community, Dave Saltmarsh.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to kick off right away asking my panelists to come up, please. We have a great opportunity to have them tell some terrific stories. I'd like to get them introduced first. We have Ashley Hegley from Pequea Valley School District in Pennsylvania. She's the technology director. We have a principal in Catherine Francis from a school that is maybe led the district in iPads, from Orchard STEM Academy in the larger Cleveland Metro School District. And we have Taylor Bell from, I said I wasn't going to giggle when I said her name because it just gets me. I've talked to her so many times and I get so excited when I think about Taylor Bell and the amazing things at Maryville University, what they're doing there. And, you know, as the technology integration specialist and global digital world coordinator. I like the global term, so it's just amazing to hear what they're going on and doing there. I'd like to say we're going to let them tell their stories and you'll understand more about who they are. One of the reasons they're up here is I can't speak to what they can because as an educator starting decades ago, who started out trying to do personalization and ensure equity happened across my classroom, I honestly failed quite a bit. I failed as an individual teacher. I mean, 5 reading groups wasn't personalized learning. 3 different math groups was not personalized learning. And then I moved on to a district, and we had some success. We had some isolated success with a few teachers here and there. You know, well, we could point to that. I saw some systematic change across my organization. But what they have in common is that they have a scaled success within their different kinds of organizations, whether it's within a school or a district or at a university. And they've had sustained success. Because we often hear of that story of 3 months in on how great things are going. And you know, we have a crowd here that pays attention to things and how they go. Did you get that program renewed? And that's what they have here as a common story. The other aspect of their common story is that they see every single individual in this room and every student that comes through their doors as a individual person and that has unique needs. And that is a challenge that we are trying to resolve, that they've found some success. And they just don't see any of us as an average student. So I'd like to get into the whys of you know, kind of do you understand why they're here? And that starts with, you know, Jamf, and sorry, I am not a sitter. Jamf knows that, why they put a chair here. 30-something years I've had a hard time sitting still. However, Jamf, and I remind all of us of this, have as a mission to help organizations succeed with Apple. And that starts with understanding what that organization sees as success with Apple. So I'm really curious about that because that is what we are here to support. So Catherine, from your perspective, what has driven you to, and the other thing we have in common is we have a couple schools who are using eSpark Learning that you saw yesterday. And then we have that common bond of not seeing a student as an average across that. But what drove your decision to combine Jamf, Apple, and eSpark to support your mission?
Right, so we wanted to individualize education for every student. We've kind of spoken a little bit about that. We are a STEM school. We're very heavily rooted in problem-based learning. And another piece of that is that how we teach is in a blended learning setting, which means that every lesson does have a technology component invested in. And of course, this is because this is how we need to prepare kids for future careers. And so the combination with Jamf and eSpark was really so that we could take some of the hard work off of teachers' plates around trying to not only, one, figure out how am I going to use devices outside of personal use, but in a classroom setting, and then 2, make sure that what kids are doing on devices is standards-based, is aligned to what they need to be learning. And so eSpark Learning was a huge way we could do that in the sense that it took every individual child's data that we do benchmark testing and says, you know, John needs this, Katie needs that, and pushes out really motivational and fun gaming that the kids kind of get to even provide feedback on as to whether or not they liked it and work on their own individual level. And so it was kind of the perfect combination of device management and not having teachers have to worry about that, and then also pushing out content that they didn't have to kind of sift through themselves while still learning how to integrate devices into the education setting.
Yeah, because experiences. Challenging and daunting task of trying to make that content for each student. Now, Ashley, I understand from the get-go, wanted to change the status quo across her organization. And you're also using eSpark and Jamf and iPads. What is the mission behind that organization? What do they see as success?
I'll point to two major initiatives that made Pequea Valley successful. And the first one would be our one-to-one program. So about 7 years ago, we were the first district in our region to implement a K-12 district device provided to each child. So K-4, each learner has an iPad, and 5 through 12, each learner has a MacBook Air. And the purpose of that was kind of double-edged. It was to level the playing field between our haves and have-nots. We have a huge economically disadvantaged population, but to also move towards this 24/7, anytime, anywhere learning environment. And through all that, it really helped us to create a culture where you talked about failure, and failure is okay. And we wanted our teaching staff to know that it's okay to take risks, and you have to take risks with technology, and we all know sometimes it doesn't work. So the second part that kind of goes hand in hand with that is mass customized learning. And if you've heard that word in education, that's our district vision and our district philosophy. And MCL focuses on customizing structures to individualize instruction for each child based on their needs and interests. And interests are a huge part of that. And it really transitions from a teacher-centered environment, moving to where your teacher is more of we call them a learning facilitator, where they're guiding children's instructions and really making the environment learner-focused and learner-centered. And a huge part of MCL is transformational technology. And so we have all these devices, but how can we really provide efficiency to our staff and enjoyment and engagement to our kids? And eSpark is one of those transformational technology tools that allowed us to do that because it does customize instruction. There's no way that a classroom facilitator could do that physically for each child in their classroom without eSpark, Apple, and Jamf.
Excellent. I remember years ago reading the book Inevitable, where mass customized learning, it sounded like an oxymoron, and I felt when it came to Jamf that has that potential, mass customizing on a giant scale kids' experiences. Now, at the university level, last I heard, eSpark doesn't go up to that expansion, and we have seen a trend. It's been identified since 2014. We saw pockets of colleges within universities adopting iPads. I've seen College of Pharmacy, College of Education, College of Nursing. I've heard a story of something with a "the" in it going to iPads for across their organization. Taylor, you've led this trend. What in the mission and the success story at the university drove you to going to an iPad one-to-one across all colleges from entry level to grad school? What?
So we have a very specific strategic plan, and basically we look at the way that higher education is done in a lot of ways in the past as a broken way. We really want to revolutionize the way that we're offering higher education to our students. There's such a diverse group of learners that come in that you want to make sure you can tailor that experience to each and every one. So our strategic plan focuses on 4 goals. Strategic growth, we want to make sure we're giving the market what it needs, and so the market needs to be able to be involved. They need to be able to be connected. We also focus on transformational innovation. There's not any point where you look at Apple and you don't think of innovation. So when we're giving instructors and facilitators these iPads, giving them professional development, it's working out really well and showing the innovation is showing in the classroom. This active learning ecosystem is also one of our goals, and that is simple. Anytime you can interact in the classroom, you are adding activity to the ecosystem, and the iPads certainly help do that. And lastly, we focus on diversity and inclusion, this idea that we can offer everyone the same elite experience regardless of where you came from or what your means are once you get there. We want to take all the challenges out of the classroom, right? Because everything outside the classroom is what's challenging.
Excellent, great. And I remember in the mid-2000s looking at universities of how they had switched to BYOD when we allowed BYOD before we did go to a one-to-one, and we often looked towards universities for what they were doing. Success, though, and measured success is important to drive initiatives. In K-12, we're always challenged with that, and often I'm a little fuzzy with that. At the university level, sometimes success is not just what the students are doing, it's change within the organization. I'll go back to you, Taylor. Success-wise, actually more specifically, Apple School Manager tools, an Apple system, Apple ecosystem that's intended sort of probably at the elementary, not the elementary, but K-12 is part of what you're doing. And I think that your use, I'd like to hear about it and how you might see that being impacting change, maybe more on the staff side.
Yeah, definitely. So we do utilize Apple School Manager and Apple Classroom enterprise-wide at Maryville, which is still big in higher education and would not have been possible without tons of help from Jamf and Apple. So thanks to all you guys out there. But we upload all of our on-ground full-time traditional courses into Apple School Manager. It's about 2,200 courses. At any point, we can have up to 500 courses active. And those active courses, those are instructors that are actually taking their devices, their iPads, into their classroom and using the classroom app to synchronize their learning. So we have one instructor that has written an iBook that's a lab manual, and she takes that lab manual and on the first day she airdrops it to her students, and then she uses Apple Classroom to push them all to the same page in the manual, and then she may choose a student to airplay, and so she'll use Classroom to airplay that student's manual and airplay the things that they've written in or the things that they've added using their Apple Pencil. And so the success we've been able to achieve with this synchronized learning and this going back to our strategic plan has just been great.
Excellent. And this is that second theme I'm trying to draw out, is that measured progress. We have measured expectations for teachers, measured expectations for growth. I've always been, and Jamf's heard me talk a lot about the SAMR model and the idea of higher order thinking and using technology to transform learning. And that can be a little fuzzy sometimes. Luckily, we can have some data to back that up. And Ashley, I know you've got some great data to show over time on how the combination of iPads, Jamf, and eSpark have impacted your students' learning. Could you share that, please?
Yeah, for us in K-12, we look at state assessment scores a lot. That seems to be what districts are judged on. But at Peckway, we don't really feel that that's an accurate representation of how good our kids are or how well we're educating them. We tend to look at growth more, because growth is a measure over time, where a state assessment test is a snapshot on how well you were doing that day. And there are so many other variables that kind of go into that number. And eSpark is something that really allows us to connect the implementation of a tool or a product to achievement, which normally, you know, Dave, is very difficult and somewhat impossible. And so with eSpark, we're looking at where our children started, like Kate mentioned, benchmark testing. So last year was our first full year of implementation in all of our K-2 classrooms, 16 classrooms, 346 learners. And at their fall benchmark testing, there were only 6 kids that tested above grade level. And that's a small number. Of 346 kids, only 6 above grade level. But when you look at our end of year scores, we're at 162 learners above grade level. And when you look at our fall testing at the beginning of this year, 103 kids of 214 are already testing above grade level. So you can imagine the advantage that that provides their learning facilitator in the classroom to be able to really help those learners go above and beyond. So we are so thrilled with the impact that eSpark and Jamf are playing daily in our classrooms.
Excellent, great. Now, that's enough to get me to jump all in. I'm one of those that can jump all in on stuff. I'm a bit of a constructionist type of teacher. I believe that the growth will come. However, sometimes getting other teachers on board to take that model, they need to have some way to ensure that the other side of it is going to come too. In some districts, you even get compensated based upon the growth of your students. So a more open classroom like myself may not prove that out. Catherine, related to that kind of progress, what have you seen at your school?
Sure. So we did actually have quite a bit of data to back that this worked. We ended up rolling out devices towards the middle of the year. So like our winter benchmark test really was kind of ground zero. So from fall to winter, our school did not see any growth. In a national percentile ranking, we're all math fans in here, you wouldn't expect to see any because everybody's relative to the other person in the group, and so everybody should be moving at the same rate. But from our winter to spring test results, we did see a 5 percentile rank increase across both subject areas and all grades. And we also did move our state report card from an F to a C in K-3 literacy, which we do directly attribute to using eSpark with those kids. So there was a lot of data to support it, and that's actually a huge piece of getting teacher buy-in. The other piece here is we can't make it punitive. It's very hard to shift from how we learned as students and how we've been taught to teach students into this really creative space of leveraging devices at a higher use and kind of even going into a global perspective of working with classrooms across the United States or even outside of the United States. So I think what was most helpful was telling teachers that, you know, this is a safe space to try new things. You're not going to lose them. We're not going to fall because we have these safeguards in place with eSpark, but then you're going to be able to really spend your time doing what you do best, which is being creative around lesson planning and catering that instruction to a very small group of students.
Excellent. And we are speaking to a majority of an IT side audience. And again, I have commercial, and you realize it goes back to what is your organization's success. It reminds us of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. The third aspect that I think these organizations also have to share is how does that impact on the IT department and then the relationships that they have within their organizations, because as someone who goes around trying to bring groups within organizations that might be siloed together, I love to show that this isn't my idea. I've just seen it working in other places. So Taylor, I know when you were given your role, you were charged with being a bridge to bring the instructional side to the systems IT together. Would you mind sharing, you know, the relationship and how it is and the processes that you do in your organization?
Definitely, definitely. So this is kind of where our data comes in, because when you look at IT, you're going to need them to make everything run and work, but you also need that instructional piece. So we have a professional development that all of our full-time faculty go through. We're at 95% of our full-time faculty that have iPads have gone through this professional development and are using it to innovate in the classroom. And then this bridge idea is that we all work as there isn't really a silo. We all kind of work as one unit. So we're a pretty small team. There's about 4 of us, and then we have the full support of IT services, which is very important. So that's where I came from into my new role. And one of my closest partners, Bob is out there somewhere, he is the manager of IT services. And so we work side by side essentially every day to ensure that on the academic side, anyone that makes requests of me, anyone that needs a course-specific app or needs something specific, we make sure that I know how to do that. I talk to Bob, and we make sure that everything on the back end is set up to receive that Jamf is tip-top and ready to go. And he ensures that. I ensure the academic side, and it's been a beautiful partnership.
Excellent, great. And for those that have been around Jamf or know Jamf for a long time, tell me if this sounds familiar. One of Taylor's and her first undergrad program was in a music department, and she started out at the university's help desk. I don't know if Zach is here today, but that definitely came up from last year. And of your other degrees, I think now you're working on a master's in cybersecurity.
That's true.
Okay. So appreciate that, being able to go on both sides and bridge that gap and bring that together. It's a great story. In Cleveland Metro School Department, if you can imagine a large group, and then as a school within that, perhaps a small fish in a giant pond. And I say that because, and I bring up Connect Ed, where your school started, and I only bring it up because we had instances where Apple went with Connect Ed to an organization that maybe didn't have iPads or Macs anywhere else, and it could be a large district. And you went through that process, and it's a while now, and there's probably been some transformation and perhaps expansion. Can you speak to that process and then where you're at now?
Yeah, I would love to. So I will be very transparent. That's a big thing with me and my staff, and in this space as well. We simply, as a district, did not use Mac because we didn't know how, and we were not going to support that. We didn't have the human capacity to do that. So we, as a building, pushed through that anyway, got this Connect Ed grant, and so the district was really in a position where whether they liked it or not, they kind of had to make this happen. And initially, I think that relationships between myself and IT were a little bit strained, and that it was very hard to make that shift. But what I can say is, since that time, since we have started that, and since people have started to kind of be forced to be comfortable with it, we have seen results, which my counterpart peers who have not been using Apple devices, but have maybe gone one-to-one using other types of devices, haven't seen the success rate that we have. And so results, again, always speak. Money and results always speak. And at this point, I'm really honored to say that I started off as the only one-to-one school in the district. There's 106 schools. But at this point in time, the entire special education department, over 20% of our students now use iPads, and all of early childhood. So every grade, K through 3, in all 106 buildings are also using iPads. And it is my hope and it is my mission that we get every kid that same access to kind of close. We talk about the achievement gap, but there's a technology gap here too, based on resources. So it is moving in the right direction, and we're very, very hopeful that over the next 5-10 years, every single child will have access to something like this.
Okay. Excellent, great, thanks. Now, also as we talk about the impact IT, sometimes those of us that kind of vision idea people have some great ideas that put a lot of work on some other people's shoulders. Casper Focus required IT to really make some effort. We're looking to school IT to help get Apple Classroom going. When I think about one of the most complicated workflows or things in schools that I've heard from and colleagues that I've talked to, it's a lot around the app side of it. The app discovery by a teacher, selection, then the approval processes, and then the deployment. And when I think about the relationship, especially when you think Jamf, iPads, and eSpark, I want to say that I'm hoping that the impact on IT is actually the reverse. And overall, what's your, since you've implemented iPads, what's the impact been to your IT staff? And what's the impact been with Jamf and eSpark, Ashley?
So the combination of the kind of seamless integration of Apple, Jamf, and eSpark has created this beautiful trifecta for us. So number one, it's what's best for kids. And that's kind of our motto in the district. And we don't really care how much time it takes or how much work it is. If it's what's best for kids, it's what we're going to do. And so these three kind of programs together give us that opportunity to customize instruction for our kids. Secondly, it's what's best for our learning facilitators, because you spoke about the time that they spend searching for apps, and they want to find the best tools for their kids, but it's time consuming with all of the other things that they have on their plate to do every day. So it's what's best for our learning facilitators, and it's also what's best for IT for a multitude of reasons. We've been able to keep our staff the same since our pre-one-to-one days. So I have not added any additional staff on our team. It's also kind of allowed us to spend more time in the classroom. So often IT is somebody behind a desk or behind on the other side of the phone or behind a chat. And it's really allowed us to build relationships with the kids in the classrooms and the facilitators in our classrooms, which makes life so much easier in general. And it's also kind of open time for us and our team to be able to create a student support team in our district. So in grades 6 through 12, we have kids that help manage our help desk and clean devices and do projects for the community. So we can spend time doing those kind of things rather than just troubleshooting issues that would happen day to day. And that would not be possible without the combination of Apple, Jamf, and eSpark.
Excellent, thank you. And we're closing on time there. I'm actually under my budget, and so I had an alibi Columbo of sorts that for years in K-12, although I had worked in high ed, I looked at high ed as the trendsetters. Well, quite frankly, you weren't living up to the personalized experience for students, and you weren't living up to the change of teacher practice. And then when I go around to organizations, I hear that that will never happen. Ashley, that's not true, right? And you've got some tools that you've done, some professional development you've done, and a lot of times in the IT world we say teachers need to get better at using technology. Specifically, what have you done to help your professors change and learn how to use technology?
Certainly, yeah. So that professional development that I mentioned earlier, that 95% of our full-time faculty have gone through, it's also offered to adjuncts. We are currently collecting data on how many adjuncts we have going through the program. It's a semester-long professional development where we actually sit with the instructors week after week. We open up an app. We create a pretend classroom for them, and we put all of them in it. We give them ideas and tasks like go create a Socrative quiz about superheroes. Make it something really interesting so that when you come back, that's your homework. You have to present that, and we're all gonna go in and we're gonna take your quiz. And we just go from app to app in that way. We encourage them to come up with new ways to use the applications, new ways to use the iPad in general. When that instructor created the iBook, no one asked her to make a lab manual as an iBook, but it ended up working out perfectly. And that's just the power that the iPad has given. We've implemented the Apple Teacher Initiative. So we are having all of our instructors voluntarily go through Apple Teacher. We're up to 52 on campus so far. And the initiative has been going on for a few months, so I'd say we're doing pretty well. We also have 5 Apple Distinguished Educators, and we are an Apple Distinguished School at Maryville. So it's very important for us to continue with innovation and professional development so that we make sure that nothing about this is stagnant. We definitely want equity in the experience, but we want to continue growing at the same rate.
Outstanding. So the stories of supporting organization goal and mission is possible on a scale and sustained, having measured progress on multiple fronts, and also supporting IT and working together in a collaborative relationship is absolutely possible. Sometimes we hear those stories and we want to talk to them. I'd like to thank you very much for your time up on the panel. Thank you for coming up. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. While Dean is going to come back on stage, they say at Jamf you can do anything on your last day. Hopefully this isn't mine, but I did want to say I felt when I walked up, I was thinking about the failures in my life. And I came to JNUC in 2011 as a non-Jamf, and I sat at a bar with an Irishman who's now a Jamf. And we talked about this idea, and he said, go talk to Chip. And I went to Chip and I said, you know, with the iPad, I've been going around the world and seeing people use iPads. Texas Instruments has this software that you can customize the experience. What if we could put the power of that together? Wow, we could make classroom management. We could have personalized learning on the fly. Well, quite frankly, if it wasn't for Chip and Zach and the belief in that possible, and then looking for other partners to make that happen, I don't believe you would see that today. So personally, I want to thank, for my experience, Zach and Chip, who helped me get here, and I believe their vision helped to get to that. So one, I want to say that. Thank you. And thank you, hopefully, to Dean, who will allow us to continue to do that after today. Cheers.
All right. We're going to wrap here. I want to just simply say one or two things at the end. First of all, I want to point out, I'm actually not a huge fan of the words device management. And the reason is, when you listen to everybody up here, nobody was talking about managing devices. They were talking about creating experiences across the board, whether it was Macs, whether it was healthcare, whether it was education. Everybody was trying to create experiences, and I think that's what we're all trying to do, and that's why your stories inspire me so much. And speaking of creating experiences, we're trying to create one here for you at JNUC, and we want to do it again next year. So we're going to ask that you pencil in the dates for JNUC next year, October 23rd to 25th, right back here at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Minneapolis. We think it's going to be a great event. We're excited to see you. I don't know when registration is going to open. Nobody told me, but I'm sure we'll tell you at some point in time. The party is tonight. I'm looking forward to seeing you. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.